Welcome to the Veritas Podcast. I'm Scott Veritas here with my co-host Ben Rebellis, and we're going to talk about Harry Potter. We're going to talk about Hogwarts Legacy, the new game coming out on consoles and PC that you may already be playing because it's selling really, really well, despite the fact that it has been the subject of an attempted boycott by our favorite people, the woke cancel mob, who came after it because, of course, Harry Potter, the book series on which it is based, was written by JK Rowling, who is considered by the woke mob to be a notorious transphobe and bigot because, and I want you guys to prepare yourself for this if you don't already know, she claimed a couple times on Twitter and in, I believe, an op-ed that she wrote, that biological sex is a real thing that we shouldn't just like throw away as if it doesn't exist, which is terrible, of course. And so we do understand the pain and suffering that has caused. But in all seriousness, this particular controversy over Hogwarts Legacy is really interesting because what we have is a situation where this very small minority of people is going ballistic because, and I think the reason for it, to try and provide some insight, because I've thought about this a lot, is when they see that something like Harry Potter has maintained its incredibly high level of popularity, despite what they have been saying about its creator, who of course is the creator. Like George Lucas is to Star Wars, what JK Rowling is to Harry Potter, what Stan Lee is to Marvel. You cannot separate the two. They came from this one person's mind for the most part. There are other collaborators, obviously, in the case of somebody, especially like Stan Lee, but these singular individuals are emblematic of that intellectual property. You can't separate them. It's very hard to do that. And so if they say something that goes against the woke orthodoxy, all of a sudden, every time that intellectual property has a success, they consider it by proxy a success of the person that they've tried to cancel, and they have a political problem on their hands. Because what it shows is that, and this is a big part of this story, most people don't care about what JK Rowling said, which was that biological sex is real. Most people, if you asked them, what do you think of JK Rowling? Especially if you stratified it by like political party or generally leaning left wing or right wing, if you asked most independents and right leaning people, they'd say, oh, that's the woman who wrote Harry Potter. Or they might say, oh, I heard something about her maybe saying something transphobic, but I haven't really looked into it. They'd probably say something like that. If you ask people on the left, you'd probably get like maybe 50-50 of people saying the same thing. And then, of course, you have I think a minority even on the left of people who'd say she's a transphobic bigot for just nothing, for just the fact that she had very basic pushback to like the complete and total erasure of women. And we're not even going to relitigate that on the show. That's something that I've talked about previously on the channel and that you already know about because it was everywhere when it happened, when she sent out those tweets. It's a huge nothing burger, and there's no merit to the accusations that she's some kind of bigoted homophobic. Remember, this is a woman who wanted us all to know that Dumbledore is retroactively gay and that the Sorting Hat eats ass. You know, like this woman is not.
I missed that second one in the culture.
Yeah, everyone knows the Sorting Hat eats ass. She announced that shortly after Dumbledore's homosexuality. It's just like, this one. Everyone knows this woman is not a bigot. So we're going to ignore that part of the story for the most part, other than to refer to how unbelievably stupid it is that that's the core of what's happening. But a big part of the story here is that Hogwarts Legacy, people are trying to boycott it, saying that you shouldn't stream the game, you shouldn't buy the game. But here's the thing. This is coming out, I think, like 2 days after the game's launched. It's when we're recording this episode. The game is selling fantastically. And the outlets that are actually bothering to review it are giving it very positive reviews. So this is a failed boycott. This is a failed cancellation attempt by pretty much any metric. The one caveat to that, and this does upset me a little bit, is, and Ben, this is where I'm going to want you to jump in because I'm curious what you thought of this, because this is a part that keeps getting left out of the story. There was a cave here on part of these developers, and it's that they made, I think this was an intentional choice, knowing that they would face this backlash. They made one of the characters in the game trans, and as I understand it, the characters in this game are mostly students at Hogwarts who are under the age of 18. This is a trans teenager that's included in the game, which goes against most people's positions on this issue. And I guarantee you this was included to try and placate this mob in advance. It didn't work. They tried to boycott the game anyway, but there is a trans character in this game. So that's the one cave that they engaged in. Ben, what did you think of that aspect of the story? Because I think that's kind of getting buried underneath everything, is that there was a cave here that I do not like, because I'm pretty sure it was I don't think this was a choice that they would have made if it weren't for Rowling's controversy.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, so many things these days that are expected to become mainstream. We have to throw in the trans person, the non-binary person. That seems to be a common choice. I am curious if wizards need puberty blockers. It seems that
I
could
was
be a pretty quick spell that you
I
wouldn't
was
need to.
thinking about this too, Accio vagina. I mean, like you could just kind of because there's transfiguration is literally as I recall, I'm more of a Star Wars guy, but as I recall, transfiguration, which is changing, shape shifting, that's a whole subject at Hogwarts. I think McGonagall is like the head of that department. Maybe she knows how to just Accio penis if you really need one. So it that's one of the things I don't like about this is it opens up this weird adult themed idea in what is ultimately a children's book inspired universe that is supposed to be wonderful and whimsical. It's wizards. It's wizards with pointy hats. Not all of them, but some of them. It's like, and this is why some people didn't like the fact that Dumbledore, of course, had to retroactively share with us this thing about his sexuality. It's like, no, he's Santa Claus. He's fucking Santa Claus, Dumbledore. He's not supposed to have a sexuality that is important to the story. So yeah, it just I don't know. I haven't played the game yet. I don't know that much about the character other than the fact that I think it's a trans woman. I think, but it just kind of feels like a cave from what I can tell. I just sense that this was something that was inserted into the game that
Yeah.
didn't need to be there.
And I'll seize on something you mentioned in kind of your introduction there, Scott, is that there almost seems to be a Streisand effect going on here. Is you've got this minority of people losing their fucking minds over a game about wizards pointing wands at each other, and now it was what the number one most streamed day one game on Twitch. It's got
Yeah.
huge sales. I think they had at least 500,000 pre-orders before the game even came out, and that number may have gone. I can't remember where I saw that number, but I think that number is even higher. So there's a sense in which this boycott. I think I heard some commenter said it's kind of a boycott. In all reality, like not only do you have people who don't care, you have people like I probably am not going to play this game. I don't play a lot of different games. I kind of have my one and I stick with it, but I'm a little curious now, and I like sticking it to woke people. Um, and
Yeah.
to the sense that you're also saying of this cave, the cave you're also seeing with like an outlet like IGN is they went ahead and reviewed this game, reviewed it well. And then if you go down into the posts, the YouTube post, it is this long, drawn out, pointless. I can't think of the word that I'm getting
It's
at.
like an editor's note,
Yeah,
essentially. Yeah.
of like, listen, we know that there are some problems potentially out there with reviewing a video game that's based on intellectual property that was, originally created by a person who's never said anything really that's ever controversial if you come into the mainstream at all. But we feel we're a video game reviewing site. We need to we need to do this. Like it's this like pre-apology for doing your job that seems so unnecessary. And the thing is, and you and I know this, it is never going to work. It doesn't work. The pre-apology, the post-apology, if they said it like layered an apology over the review so it's barely audible, that wouldn't work either. Like you are not going to be able to appease these people because they're insane and they like the power that they get from being able to claim that they are either the oppressed party or that they are defending the oppressed party.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, and I wanted to bring up this little editor's note from IGN. IGN's been garbage for a while. I mean, they fired Colin Moriarty years ago. Colin Moriarty, who's now on Sacred Symbols and doing, Colin's Last Stand. Great guy. By the way, if you're interested in gaming content that comes from somebody who actually has some integrity, check out Colin Moriarty and his podcast with Chris Ray Gunn. Really great guys, either of whom I'd love to talk to at some point if I had the opportunity. Big fans of both of them. But they fired Colin Moriarty years ago because he made a dad joke on Twitter that was considered misogynistic. He had been one of like the founders of like a major department there at IGN. I think this was back in like 2015. It was one of the OG cancellations, if you will. So they've been garbage for a while, and they've always had this sort of undertone of left-wing politics to a lot of their reviews whenever it is somewhat relevant. Here, I was glad that they reviewed the game. I actually was not certain that they would. Because there have been a couple of outlets that have not. Smaller gaming journalism outlets. It's not been a good moment for gaming journalism. I'll say that. They have not handled this well. Because what you're getting from most outlets is they review the game, they give it a positive review on its own merits, which is, I'm not going to really give them a round of applause for that. That's literally their job. And then they include this sort of like editor's note just like IGN did. IGN is one of the biggest game reviewing sites there is. And they say like, yeah, exactly what you were about. Like, we acknowledge that, this game is inspired by a person who has made comments erasing people, blah, blah. It's just nonsense, garbage. And, so you've seen that. And then in one case, I think it was Kotaku. This was hilarious. They reviewed the game and gave it a 1 out of 10, which I was waiting. I knew there'd be at least one
Wired
example
did
of
too.
this. Was it okay? Maybe it was Wired. Maybe I'm smearing Kotaku here. I think it was Wired. They gave the game a 1 out of 10 because it was like, oh, well, this is a homophobic, transphobic game, which I knew that would happen, but it still is astonishing the lack of professionality that it takes to review a game and not review it on its merits and instead review it on the basis of your political ideology. It's not the first time we've seen this happen. Things get attacked all the time for specious reasons, but that was pretty astonishing. So not a great moment for gaming journalism. And I'll say this, boycott these fucking outlets. They're already hemorrhaging money. They don't deserve your money. IGN doesn't deserve your money. I probably should have pirated the review of the game. I shouldn't have given them even a single YouTube view. I did watch their review of the game when I was researching this episode. These you should look to independent creators for these kind of reviews, because there are, like Angry Joe or whoever. I haven't kept up with Angry Joe. I don't know how woke he's gotten, but there are good and for all I know, he hasn't at all, by the way. I literally haven't watched Angry Joe in years, but I know he's like an independent game reviewer. And, certainly Colin Moriarty and others. You should look to these independent creators. The Critical Drinker is great, as somebody that I watch a lot of content of. Look to them. Look, I would say this at this point. I'll go so far as to say this. If somebody is not engaging in media critique with a critical eye for wokeness at this point in 2023, they probably are going to engage in this kind of woke nonsense behavior. It really harkens to kind of the neo-reactionary saying, every institution that is not inherently right-wing eventually becomes left-wing. It's unfortunately, because IGN at one point just reviewed games. That was all they did. There's nothing political about IGN until they fired Colin Moriarty. It was just, they just reviewed video games. Everything before Gamergate and Anita Sarkeesian. That's just how the gaming journalism world was. It was a lot of fun. Guys played video games and told you what they thought of it. But now I think you have to look for somebody that is being critical of this stuff and is not going to cave to this stuff, because it inevitably is going to impact how they, look at these things, and they'll either do an editor's note, or in the case of Wired, they actually gave it a bad review on the sole basis of this stupid fucking controversy.
And that actually is a question that I've been wondering about for a few years, and I recognize, Gamergate happened, but my overarching question is, why is this happening to gaming? Like both video games, like why are we so susceptible to this takeover of our institutions? Is there some social awkwardness trying to be a part of the current thing so we can be acceptable? Is it because gamers believe that they're outsiders and this is kind of an outside perspective, even though it's totally consistent with the orthodoxy? Like, I just don't understand how I can go to Gen Con and see a bearded dude in a Viking costume sporting a lanyard badge that has 4 different flags hanging from it about his gender, race, and sexual orientation. Like, why is this community so susceptible? Because it doesn't even seem like it's the minute here. This isn't even like a little bit of woke. Like, it seems like gamers, at least a percentage of them that doesn't seem insignificant, have really gone all the way to the wall on this.
I think it's a case where the loudest voices are maybe misrepresenting the community. The gaming community maintains a certain amount of resistance to this. Overall, I think that, we've talked about this on the show before, actually, when the leaks for the next Grand Theft Auto game were coming out.
That's right. Yeah.
This is a community that was overwhelmingly comprised of, middle class young men who liked to play video games because they're not like playing water polo like the rich kids, and they were at least wealthy enough to afford, an Xbox. Middle class young men kind of built the industry up in the 90s and the 2000s into the behemoth we know it as today. Women started to become a lot more interested in actual gaming, because you'll always see these statistics about like women actually have always gamed just as much as men, but they were playing games on their cell phones, is what they don't tell you, is what those statistics are based. It's like Bejeweled. Yeah. They started using those statistics when women were addicted to Bejeweled. Women really started to look, and there's always been women who play video games. There's always been women who design video games, but it was a very small minority of the overall marketplace until around 2010, and especially around 2013, 14. And I think look, there was a hostile takeover. It was like every other institution, and it was targeted because it was understood to be important to a group that was very resistant to political correctness. Gamers were known for being very politically incorrect. If you went into a Call of Duty game lobby in the year 2011, you'd hear a lot of N-words. You hear a lot
Yeah.
of words that rhyme with maggot. And other words, you'd hear a lot of that stuff that I can't say without getting the show demonetized. And so I'll do my best not to, but you would hear these things because this was the culture. Think about this. This is young guys farting and drinking Mountain Dew in their basements playing Halo. They're screaming the N-word. We all remember this, but some of us remember it somewhat fondly, let's say. Not saying I do necessarily, but some of us do. And I think it was seen as a target that need to be destroyed because you can't have that in the total woke state. You can't have an environment in which young men are sitting around farting, screaming slurs at each other as a joke. By the way, it was never. I don't actually want to cop to the idea that gamers were this horrible racist group of kids. They were just teenage boys who are going to do that sort of thing, and so I think it was targeted. I think that they infiltrated the institutions, the studios. They went in saying like, hey, let's get more representation of women and gays. And so those people infiltrated the studios. They went in and they started complaining. And they started saying, if you don't bend to these whims, we're going to accuse the company of X, Y, and Z. If you don't put this in your game, then, I'm going to whistle blow that the game, and then of course you had people who just completely interloped into the whole industry, like Anita Sarkeesian, who like never even played a video game until 2012 when she decided she wanted to complain about Princess Peach not being a complex enough character in fucking Mario, known for its incredibly complex characters. So I think there was a targeted attack on it the same way that there is with any industry that is seen as not sufficiently woke, which is everything. Like if something is important, it's going to get attacked by this group of people. And I think that the gaming industry was attacked because it was important, and it was important to a sort of resistant faction, which is this sort of young middle class guy that just wants to play video games. That is something that needed to be attacked and was attacked. And it's been somewhat successful. I mean, you look at this game, it's very clear that there was kind of a shoehorned in attempt at ethnic diversity, which the game takes place in England in the 1890s. It's the wizarding world. So I guess, there could be all sorts of different people. I don't know. But the trans thing definitely comes off as a cave.
Yeah.
But I think. Yeah.
And I think there's, and maybe this will overlap with your thought here, but I think there's also a money aspect to here. Video games became huge business in the last 10 15 years. I don't know the numbers. I saw XQC's comments about this controversy, as much as I could understand his speech coming through his Adderall clenched teeth. But he did have a point, is every day people give money to corporations or businesses that are far more vile than JK Rowling, no matter how vile you believe her to be. Do you have an account at Chase Bank? Yeah, those people are fucking evil. How about the chickens you buy from a factory farm? Probably more evil than a woman who doesn't want to see a penis in the shower at her local YMCA. How about your government? How were you aware that nobody went to prison because of the massive, I cannot overemphasize how massive, fraud that occurred as the result of the financial crisis and the mortgage crisis in 2008? Were people this upset when the head of the criminal division, Lanny Brewster, the criminal division of the DOJ, went on 60 Minutes and he said that they would not prosecute banks and bankers because that would upset the banking system? That's like saying I'm not going to prosecute a drunk driver because that would be bad for him. So I don't understand why people are so mad about a person. And JK Rowling, I went back and looked. She wrote a 2020 essay about this whole controversy. And I really want to find this quote because I wrote it down. She wrote a very empathetic. Okay, here we go. She wrote, I want to be very clear here. I know transition will be a solution for some gender dysphoric people. And then later on in the piece, she said, if you could come inside my head and understand what I feel when I read about a trans woman dying at the hands of a violent man, you'd find solidarity and kinship. We're not going to participate in her intellectual property. That's the person we're going to boycott when there are plenty of evils in this world that we give money to on a auto pay basis. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, the thing about that, Ben, is 99% of the people who talk shit about JK Rowling have not read that op-ed. 99%. I guarantee you, 99%. And 95% of them have never even read the original tweet that she sent out that set off this whole thing in roughly 2018. There's a very small minority of them that have even engaged with it. If you ask someone, like if you did the man on the street thing I mentioned earlier, and you talk to these people who say, oh yeah, JK Rowling, I hear she's transphobic now. And you ask them, what did she say that was transphobic? Very basic question, a question they should be able to answer. A significant, probably 95% of them, again, would go, I don't know.
Yeah.
And it's because there's nothing there. There is nothing there. And we see this with all of these different issues. If you ask somebody who says they're a Black Lives Matter activist, how many unarmed black men were shot by the cops last year? They'd say, I don't know. And you go, just guess. And they say 500, 1,000. And you'd be like 15. Way off. This is a question you are obligated to answer because of the things that you're doing. You have to be, but it is so discrediting that these people haven't read what you just read to our audience, which is, the original op-ed. I encourage everyone to give it a read. I gave it a read when it came out. I don't remember all the details of it, but I could tell that JK was attempting to kind of placate this crowd. And I think it comes from a genuine place. She does have left-wing political views. This is a woman who is famously like a feminist. She's a domestic abuse survivor and an activist against domestic abuse against women. She cares a lot about feminism and women's issues. She's very much in the same realm as someone we've had on the show, Meghan Murphy, who has become a quote unquote gender critical feminist, or quote on double quote TERF, if you will. And so I don't say that J.K. Rowling is I don't think she's disingenuous, but I do think that she wrote that whole op-ed thinking naively in her mind that it might solve the problem. And it shouldn't be naive. I mean, she should be right. It's the right thing to do, to just explain your position and explain how it's not nearly as bad as it's being made out to be. But it's another lesson, just like this game has been, in don't give an inch. It's the time for that is over. The time for we're going to debate our way out of this. We're going to explain our way out of this. We're going to show people. Remember, think back to the Evergreen College meltdown. There's the video, the infamous video of Brett Weinstein being cornered by this mob of students, much like the mob has materialized for this game. But you see it in an even scarier manifestation than it ever has been with Rowling, with Weinstein, because he was physically accosted in his classroom and cornered. And he is clearly trying so hard in his attempt at a dialogue with them to show them that he is not even close to the man they have made him out to be in their heads. And he's proving that to them. He's standing there and he's being so polite and so calm. And he's using every ounce of his self-restraint to do so, because it's not easy to do. There's 50 people yelling at you. It's very tempting to start swinging, either verbally or physically. It's just what your human instinct's going to tell you to do. But Brett Weinstein, or to run. And instead of doing that, he stands there and he said something famously that I think, is a word that will live in both fame and infamy. He said, history could pivot in this hallway if you would just stop yelling for a moment and listen to me. He said, history, what a beautiful way to try and get these kids. And remember, this is a professor-student relationship. And he said, history could pivot in this hallway if you would please. He's imploring them to just stop yelling for a moment and actually listen to what I am saying. Don't make up something else for me in your head. Actually listen to what I'm saying. And they wouldn't do it. And from that moment forward, I understood, and I would implore the audience to understand, that there is a certain type of person with whom you do not negotiate. These are intellectual terrorists, and they have no intention of letting the hostages go. There was nothing that Brett Weinstein could have said or done to get him out of the situation he was in. And there's nothing J.K. Rowling can do to placate these people. And there's nothing that could have been included in this game. You could have had a character named J.R. Raoul, who dies a violent death by the hands of the trans character in the game, and they probably wouldn't have been enough.
No.
As a matter of fact, they would have ended up with a different problem at that point, probably. But there would have been a whole other group of people.
Would have been misogynistic at that point.
But like, there's nothing you can do to satisfy a certain type of person. Now, I don't want to discourage people if you think you've met someone who is not completely ideologically possessed. I've met people like this who I think maybe are a little bit misguided. They have some bad information, but they are good people. They actually are capable of active listening, right? Doing what Brett Weinstein asked his students to do in that hallway. You should actually try to have a dialogue with some people. There are people that can be saved, but there are a lot of people that absolutely cannot be brought away from this. I definitely think, as you were saying earlier, Ben, we've got the 1% of the 1% here going after this game.
Yeah.
Thankfully, the cancellation attempt has failed pretty miserably at the end of the day. I mentioned the caveat with the caving with the trans character. The game is selling really, really well. And the outlets that are bothering to review it are giving it overwhelmingly positive reviews. What I want to mention before we move on to anything else, though, is this is whenever we have a situation like this, I always think when there's a success for the heterodoxy, right? For someone who has expressed heterodox views like JK Rowling, how do you replicate that? And I fear that this is an extension of the original problem with trying to replicate JK Rowling's success, which is she is too big to fail. She's uncancelable because she's a multi-billionaire and she wrote the most celebrated novel series of the 21st century. And it's a little bit hard to cancel her, but she's kind of at the top of the heap. Dave Chappelle, very similar situation, one of the greatest, 5 living comedians in the world. Some people would say the best. And this is kind of an extension of that. This succeeded, I think, largely because it's fucking Harry Potter. Like, people want to go to Hogwarts. Like, this is not some indie game. Like, people have been wanting an open world Harry Potter game. Let me tell you something right now. I haven't played the game yet. If this was a Star Wars game, there could be a trans character on every other level, and I would just there could be like, it could be pretty in your face, and I'd be like, I still kind of want to play. There's an open world Star Wars game. Actually,
and you would lightsaber him down.
Yeah,
I'm kidding.
Hypothetically speaking, it's in a video game in Minecraft, right? It's in a video game in Minecraft, as they say.
Yeah.
In a hypothetical Star Wars open world game. I'll say this. I definitely did not, in the open world Lego Star Wars game that came out, constantly kill the Rose Tico character whenever I was forced to have her in my party. I definitely did not shoot her repeatedly and lightsaber her to death over and over again because I was annoyed that I was forced to play as her in that fucking game. I didn't do that because that would be wrong. But in any case, yeah, I'm very proud of my self-restraint there that I totally was just, I'll just play as Rose for a level or two. It's fine. That's a great character. That's a great iconic role from Star Wars. And, Luke Skywalker, eat your heart out. Everyone wants to play as Rose Tico. Anyway, I think about how to replicate the success of a situation like this, and it's hard because Harry Potter is such a big IP. Ben, how do you think we can take some of the lessons of this and hopefully use them to defend smaller creators, smaller artists, smaller people than JK Rowling and the Harry Potter intellectual property when they're facing these mobs? Because most of the success we see pushing back on these mobs comes from a situation where someone or something is too big to fail.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right here. I think it was Wilfred Riley on Twitter who said that J.K. Rowling had "fuck they them" money, and that's true. I mean, do we think that that Cyberpunk 2077, which previously was the #1 most streamed game on Twitch on day one, would have done as well if that creator had some questionable comments about trans people? I just don't think so. But Harry Potter is, it's Star Wars. It's Elvis Presley. It is so huge. The problem is when it comes to smaller intellectual properties. And unfortunately, and I say this unfortunately, I think the solution is what I'm going to call, again, unfortunately, the Dave Rubin solution. You and I both were previously influenced by, had a lot of respect for Dave Rubin in his early years, but Dave figured out that he was less cancelable and more profitable if he tilted himself toward conservatives, and that's what his show is now. So maybe the solution is for the Daily Wire to become as big as Disney and being able to launch projects with the Daily Wire's bulletproof vest strapped to it. Again, I want to make sure I know I don't like this solution. It's just the one I can think of. What I want is for people to be less fucking crazy. What I want is for meritocracy and competition on quality to prevail. In my perfect world, if a homophobe makes the best chicken sandwich in the world, I want that to be the most sold chicken sandwich in the world. But these days, if I was a video game developer and I had an awesome product and I wanted it to be uncancelable, because I obviously can't produce anything now, given the things I've said over the 14, 15 episodes we've done, I'm going to have to call Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro to see if they'll help me out and put out a product that I know at least conservatives will buy. And I don't like how that creates this bifurcated society. But if I was advising somebody, I think that's what I'd do.
Well, and another aspect of this is, God forbid you actually want to say something vaguely right wing in your game. I mean, they always,
sure.
on the left, they always say games are allowed to be political. And you know what they are? There is a sort of subtle political message in the game. BioShock, largely considered to be one of the best stories in all of gaming. In a lot of video games, Spec Ops The Line, there are lots of games that have politics in them. Let's say, but of course, the politics is always somewhat, philosophical in nature and hard to pin down ideologically, or it is actually overtly left wing. You won't really see a lot of conservative messaging in video games. Let's say hypothetically someone wanted to have just a vaguely conservative message in one of their games. You would not be able to get that game produced unless you did it through something like the Daily Wire or Daily Wire Plus. I know they only make films right now, but if they made video games, which is unfortunate. Because it means there is no actual marketplace of ideas. This is the left claiming that they can say whatever they want, and they don't want anyone else to be able to spread that kind of messaging, which just means it's propaganda if there isn't, fair play on both sides. I do think that there are a lot of different factors that go into whether or not a cancellation is successful, right? And some cancellations you see are successful in the short term, but not in the long term. Look no further than Louis C.K. Louis C.K. disappeared for a year and a half after he was caught, touching himself inappropriately in front of some ladies. But he didn't R-word anyone. He didn't do anything that people actually thought he should have to disappear forever for. So after a year and a half of disappearing, having one of his films canceled, which apparently costed him millions and millions of dollars, so suffering some pretty major consequences, it's definitely a hit in the short term. He came back with a vengeance over the course of the past few years. You see this with a lot of people. Winston Marshall, who actually was referenced on an episode of Bill Maher, of Real Time with Bill Maher the other day. And Bill Maher kind of did him dirty a little bit because he forgot to mention what happened in the long term in that situation. Winston Marshall is the bass banjoist from Mumford & Sons.
Yep.
And when he said that he enjoyed the work of Andy Ngo and the books that Andy Ngo was writing about Antifa, he was mobbed, made a sort of, somewhat pathetic, at least at the time, apology of because why apologize for that? He made an apology and he left the band and all that. But eventually he completely did a 180 and said, yeah, I was under a lot of pressure. I made a mistake by apologizing. I take it back. What I said was completely appropriate, and I stand up for what I said. And by the way, kudos to, Winston for that 100%. It was a little sad to see him cave initially, but obviously it's better to come around in the long term and say, actually, you know what? I am going to stand up to people than it is to never do that at all. So I do give him credit for that. But you see a lot of situations like that where it's not clear. It's unclear who really won. I would say Louis C.K. seems to be coming out on top, thankfully. I actually saw him a couple of years ago locally, but he was very funny, by the way. You should all check out Louis C.K.'s stuff. He's been great. But it's muddled. There are so many factors that go into that. There's the actual, so like Louis C.K. is such a big comedian, right? But he also is a white guy. He did a thing that was it was worse than what Rowling did. He did a thing that most people actually acknowledge is wrong. Like I would acknowledge that what Louis C.K. did was bad. So it's like the severity of the offense, the amount of social capital there is to spend, the demographics at play are huge. If you're a white guy, you're disadvantaged in these situations. But Dave Chappelle is a black man. That helps him, I think. So I would say it's hard to replicate success in these situations other than to say that you have to max out the factors that are going to help you survive. One of those is your own fortitude. So like Winston had, and I don't think he would deny this, a failure of fortitude when he was initially attacked by the mob. I don't want to admonish him that heavily for that. It's hard when the mob comes after you.
And I think that part of that, if I remember that correctly, I think part of that was him trying to help his bandmates as well. Like people were coming after the band and not just specifically him. And I think that's kind of him saying like, I'm sorry, please don't attack Mumford and Sons because my bandmates don't have anything to do with this.
Well, and obviously the record execs sat down with him and were like, you have to apologize. And this kind of pressure is something that unless you've experienced it personally is very hard to understand. And I don't necessarily blame people depending on the amount of pressure they're under, what exactly they said, and the specific scenarios. I don't want to say Winston's not a pathetic guy. He did a great
No.
thing by eventually turning around and saying, hey, you know what? I am going to stand up for my beliefs. And he's spoken about it at length. He spent a lot more time standing up for himself than he did apologizing, the initial apology. So all the credit to Winston in the world, but he was in a situation where if he had had maximum fortitude, he wouldn't have initially apologized. He would have made them fire him from the band. He wouldn't have voluntarily left, which I don't think he should have. You have somebody like Shane Gillis, who had to be fired from SNL because he refused to make the kind of statements they wanted him to make. He did sort of apologize for what he'd said, but they actually produced a PR prepared statement for him that he just refused to put out there. He said, I'm a comedian. I'm not putting someone else's words on my Twitter to apologize for a joke I made years ago on a podcast. But at the end of the day, he still got fired. Shane's just not a particularly political guy. He hasn't leaned into politics super hard. But he's continued to do comedy and be very successful at that. So Shane Gillis, kind of a success story, despite the fact that he was the target of a huge backlash because of allegedly racist comments he'd made about Asian people and Andrew Yang. But I would say that fortitude is something you control. You do at the end of the day, if you really, really want to, you can stick it to these people as best you can by just saying, I'm not going to cave. And if at the end of the day, they still get you, at least you can say that you tried. If your game or your movie fails or your show gets canceled because the venue says we're literally going to turn the lights out on you, if there's something out of your control that ends up meaning that there's a de facto victory for the cancelers, you still have a strong moral victory as long as you did your best to say no. And to be a kind of a white pill here, you may just survive. You may not even have, a temporary, a short-term, setback. If you just say no to these people, I think people would be surprised how quickly these things can pass because it's very ephemeral. Like they come out and they get pissed off. And then there's another thing to get pissed off about 3 days later because they're perpetually aggrieved. And if they see that you are not a soft target, they're going to want to move on. They don't want to have to work for their meals. They don't want to have to work for their scalps. They're going for easy targets, just like any evil person does. Criminals who are looking for victims on the street to mug, they look for small, 4'10" young ladies who aren't paying attention, who have headphones in. They don't look for people who are actually going to put up a fight. Neither do these fucking cretins. All right. They're looking for soft targets. So if you make yourself not a soft target, which a lot of people who lean a little bit more to the right maybe know more how to do, just because of the way they've learned to navigate the world, you can survive these cancellation attempts. And I would encourage people to take the things they have control over and use those to try and survive this stuff. Because the more people survive these attempts, or at least eventually, come to Jesus like Winston did, if you will, for lack of a better term, the more that this mob will feel like they don't actually have all the power and that they should shut the fuck up and be put in their place, which is to shut up and let people play fucking Harry Potter video games if they want to.
Yeah, it's almost like people need to use the strategy. So I've mentioned here I'm an attorney, and sometimes I'll deal with cases, and my opponent is being a crazy person. And my response, the best response, the most persuasive response, is not to be a crazy person in return. It's to be the most reasonable person in the room. And I think that people can take that, and they can even leverage people's insanity for their own benefit. Like, look at someone like Matt Walsh. Like, every single person that goes after Matt Walsh with some crazy idiocy makes his fans love him more. Rather than be canceled at large, Matt Walsh has been made a celebrity by people who have tried to cancel him. So there is a little bit of a tide turning of just to be standing up against these insane idiots and actually using their idiocy for your own benefit.
Yeah. Yeah. I highly encourage people to stand up to this stuff. It's not going to change if we don't do that. I've said on the show before, and I'll say it again. And look, there's a reason Scott Veritas is not my legal name. And I don't really say my legal name on the show because I do understand that for some people, you're going out there to say stuff and you could lose your job, just like I could, maybe, God forbid, lose mine, my day job. If people find out that I have, mainstream political views, which apparently are a fireable offense these days. But, I just encourage people, do what you can, take all the factors into play. I know if you have kids to feed, it's hard and you have to try and protect your identity. But I'll give my example. I made a compromise and said, I'm going to speak about this stuff publicly and I'm just not going to use my real name. I do show my face. So there's a huge risk that is put for me and for Ben every time that we
Same.
come on this show. There's a risk because we're showing our face and can be identified. But, beyond using, Ben Rebellis isn't a real name either. I hate to spoil it for people. It's actually not as cool as these names are. They're not real.
I just wanted everyone to think my mom was awesome and gave me this awesome name.
But you can make some compromises in terms of anonymity because it's understandable why you might want to remain anonymous. There's been a lot of controversy on this lately because Jordan Peterson has been particularly critical of anonymous Twitter people, especially in the neo-reactionary space. And I do think Peterson is a little bit, I think it's a kind of a sign of his age, is that he just doesn't quite understand. And also he's somebody who famously monetized, as you were saying, Ben. Right. Peterson famously monetized the insanity of his critics. He said that, by the way, on Rogan. He hasn't tried to hide that. He said, I have learned to monetize their insanity. I have learned to monetize these social justice activists. So he certainly hasn't tried to hide it. And I don't think he understands that he was in a prime position to do that because he is extremely intellectually gifted. Peterson is a genius. I think he's a very smart man. And you add that to the fact that he was a tenured professor who was very difficult to fire, and that he made all the right connections, and that it was years ago when every instance of this was given a lot of institutional support by people on the right. You could go on your media tour. You would do Rubin, you'd do Shapiro, you'd do Crowder, you'd do Rogan. You could go on Joe Rogan. It's much harder to get into that position. Like, for instance, Shane Gillis, by the time he had his issues, Rogan was getting a lot more interview requests. He was, talking to people like Elon Musk. Gillis famously did not get on Rogan until years after his controversy. And he joked about that on Rogan, infamously joked about, like, it'll be fine. I'll just end up on Joe Rogan. And then Joe Rogan kind of looked at him like, I think I was booked up that week. I don't know what you're getting at. But in any case, I do have another story that I want to talk about today, which it's a little bit of an older story. It pretty much came to light almost exactly just a few days after the last episode came out. We've been doing these bi-weekly, so sometimes we're going to be a little bit late coming to stuff, but I wanted to talk about it because it's really interesting to me. There's a streamer on Twitch named Atrioc, a male streamer who got caught during a stream. I think there was like a screenshot where people noticed that he had pornography up on the screen, and it wasn't just pornography, it was deepfake pornography. And it wasn't just deepfake pornography, it was deepfake pornography where the people being deepfaked were people that he personally knew and had streamed with and been friends with, all female streamers. And so it was embarrassing. This guy got caught yerking it to his friends, which is embarrassing and very awkward.
And weird.
And it is odd. It is weird, especially because I think he's married. And that's going to come into play in a second. We're going to talk about that because his wife ends up in this story for seemingly unknown reasons. But so this situation happens, and it was a controversy because this embarrassing thing happened to this guy. He got caught doing a weird thing. The response to it has been a little over the top, in my opinion, and I want to talk about it. This guy was so humiliated, and he obviously felt very bad about this, as anyone would. If you get caught doing something like this, it's fucking embarrassing, naturally. And it's natural to feel that way and to feel a little ashamed, maybe even, that somebody who thought they had a platonic relationship with you now knows that they don't really, that you think about them in a way that they maybe thought you didn't think about them. But there's also a little bit of naivete here on the part of some of these women that I want to get into. I'll start with this young woman named, her screen name is QtCinderella. She was one of the women who I think had been deep faked. And by the way, we're also going to talk about the ethics of actually deep faking someone, because it is, this woman was clearly super upset. She has this sobbing video of her saying, like, why would somebody do this? Why do people do this? It is infuriating that these very realistic images of me doing demeaning, gross, pornographic things are being produced without my consent. And I want to start by saying it is completely sympathetic that it is understandable that a person would be upset if you sent me a video and it's like, hey, here's Scott Veritas getting fucked by an octopus in a hentai. Like, here's me getting tentacle.
That is not a request for fan art. We do not need any fan art.
Yeah, not a request. But I'm saying quite the contrary. If you sent that to me, it would bother me a lot. I'd be like, what the fuck? I'd be like, this is really gross and weird that somebody is doing this to me and using my image to create this demeaning, gross stuff. If you sent me a video of me getting fucked in the ass in a deep fake, I would not be happy about it. I understand that. And I want to sympathize with that because I'm going to be a little bit critical of these women. I totally understand why this is upsetting. It should be upsetting. It would be weird if you saw this and you went, "Oh, cool, great." But the hysterical sobbing didn't sit right with me. Seeing this woman just sobbing like someone in her family died in this video, it really didn't sit right with me. And the reasons for that, I think, speak to something that's getting left out of this conversation. Because what we keep hearing about is this is women's images being used without their consent to make pornography, which is a thing that has more or less existed. It's as old as time because people have fantasized about people without their consent since the dawn of time. And pretty much every man on planet Earth has done that, has fantasized about somebody who probably wasn't particularly interested in them sexually, you know, the popular girl at your high school or who it might have been. And then there's a smaller percentage of men, but not insignificant, who have gone to Instagram, Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, all the places where women do often post sexually provocative imagery of themselves, whether it's in a bikini, dancing in a bikini, whatever, and they've masturbated to it. That's something that happens in the world. There's no way that it doesn't, especially if you've got a very attractive woman putting those images of themselves out there. Now, to be fair to this qtcinderella girl, I wanted to see what she had kind of put out into the world because some of these streamers, they're titty streamers. They literally play up their sexuality constantly. Yeah, they have OnlyFans. They are porn stars, basically. I want to be very clear. That's not what this girl is. I looked into it just so I could get a better idea of how to talk about this story. There's like, you could find like a couple of bikini photos on her Instagram or whatever, but nothing where she's really leaning into that aspect of her content. So her position is defensible from that standpoint. She's not just like a porn star or something that is already doing this stuff and then gets mad when there's a little bit of, you know, artificial stuff going on. But I think, and here's where I'll have you jump in, Ben, because I don't know if you agree with me on this. It's kind of a hot take, even for this show. This didn't sit right with me because this woman and a lot of these women make so much money, easy money. Because I'll be frank, I watched this girl's content and it's not particularly sexual. It's also not very entertaining.
What is it?
It's just I'm sitting here and I'm talking and I'm maybe playing video games.
Just chatting on Twitch or
yeah,
is
just
actually
like
playing
chatting,
games?
playing video games. I think maybe sometimes she's like out with her friends and it's like, here's a snap of me dancing with my friend. It's just garbage. Anyone who's consuming this really needs to take a step back from the internet. It's a weird parasocial thing but here's the thing, men are watching this content because she's attractive. Like she is attractive. She doesn't play it up as much as some creators would, but she's an attractive girl. She's putting this content out there. And I think these men who are watching it maybe feel like they're the simps, if you will. They feel like they're hanging out with her. They're getting this attention they can't get otherwise. We've talked about this on the show before, I think. So she's benefiting from this parasocial relationship. She benefits from the fact that she's an attractive woman putting her image out there on the internet. She's made tons of easy money doing that. Her life is better than 98% of people in the world. She's a self-employed streamer who actually, and good for her, by the way, I give her all the credit in the world for this, doesn't have to demean herself that much, doesn't create pornography. And I give her credit for that because that's the easy route to go when you look like her, is just to, you know, shoot to the top because you're being particularly sexual with it. But the fact that she's benefited so much from this, and then all of a sudden there's this negative side effect, right? There's the price of fame, if you will. This is a tale as old as time, as modern media, right? The price of fame comes in where it turns out, yes, men are sexualizing you on the internet, and they're doing it using technology that has existed at this point for 4 or 5 years. It just struck me as a little naive on her part to be sobbing over it. Ben, I don't know how you feel about this, but it just didn't sit right with me. It was like, yeah, you know what? You've benefited so much from this career. All of a sudden, you know, a legitimately unpleasant thing happens as a result of it. But it just was like, maybe you should think of it in the big picture and it won't bother you quite as much.
Yeah, I have actually some questions. You may or may not know the answers to these questions, but like, so these I've not seen any of this deepfake stuff because I've learned from this video that if I go watch it, I have to then bring my fiance in here and cry on camera.
Yeah, we're going to talk about that in a second.
Yeah, I've learned that that's actually what happens if I go look at this. Is this like, so are these just like images? Like it's like someone else's body, her face.
Yeah, so that has existed for the photoshopping thing that you're kind of talking about, Ben. But what this is it's much more like effective. Like you can see, you can see videos of this on Twitter where it's like it's Joe Biden and he's saying the N-word or something. Like they do it where they can really make it look like you're doing it. They'd superimpose a person's face over a porn star's body, and it's much more believable than then, and I've been abstaining from pornography for the last few years, and particularly the last few months. So I haven't really seen a lot of this stuff myself, but it's much more believable. I've seen the non-pornographic ones where it really
Okay.
looks like Barack Obama is saying like all sorts of heinous things. And so that's, I think, part of why it's particularly upsetting to some of these women is that it looks much more believable. It looks,
Okay.
it's at the high end, it looks almost photorealistic.
So that's part of my thing here is let's put aside kind of the morality, the consent part of it, although I think consent's a really weird word to use in this context. But one of the things I'm thinking here is, let's say this girl has a job, has a real job, or wants to get a real job in the future. Is this believable enough that you could look at it and be like, oh yeah, that chick did porn? Like, there's a difference between someone using Microsoft Paint to put the girl's head on someone else's body, as opposed to like, if I could watch this and just not be able to even tell. That seems to be very different just from a very practical point of view of like, do people out there think you're actually doing, like, is that how believable that is? And the closer it gets to that believability line, I think that is makes it way worse. But I feel bad because I sympathize with someone who's in distress about this. I understand so I'm going to say something insensitive on top of that. Do hot girls know that this is what goes on? Like, even outside of the context of girls who put themselves on the internet, just like, do they know that there's creeps in the world who see a girl at Fresh Time or whatever grocery store, and they go home and think about them while they're touching themselves? Like, is this like this is a dude thing. This is me being completely unaware. Like, is this like something they know?
Well, as a hot girl myself,
Right.
No, but you made two great points, man. Two really good points, by the way, that I'm glad you made. And I want to address them one at a time. So I'm always glad that we have an attorney on the show, because it's a great point that a legal standard that is constantly cited in this type of cases, could it be confused for a reality? So like parody is generally supported in copyright cases or in defamation cases, as long as it is very clearly parody. This is why Elon Musk wants you to put parody in your Twitter account if you have a parody account, because the legal standard that is said is, could it actually be mistaken for the real thing?
Yeah,
and it's a legitimate standard, right? Because then you're violating someone's trademark. You might be benefiting where they were supposed to benefit. If you make a Star Wars movie where all you've done is cut, 1 minute and 30 seconds out of an actual Star Wars film, people would think it's the real thing, and that you'd be bootlegging it and taking money away from George Lucas. You could say that about somebody's image, and especially in a case where it's a totally legitimate point that I hadn't thought about, which is, yeah, I mean, her parents could see this and be like, what have you done? And she'd be like, well, I didn't do this. And this is something we're going to have to contend with as a society, because somebody can make one of these of me saying the N-word or something or espousing views that I don't hold. And it's something that is scary to think about, and that's going to come up in the next few years. So I think that's a great point, and I totally sympathize with that, especially if and again, I sympathize with this being upsetting. I just think it was a little over the top. But your second point, I really want to address, and I had thought about this. I'm not a hot woman. Neither of us are hot women, and we'll never know what it's like to be a hot woman. But one can speculate, right? And I don't know how to answer. I think there are some women who are very aware of the fact that like they have fucking superpowers and their life is very different from many other people's lives because they're an 8 or higher and they're a woman. And that is just, you're on a whole different stratosphere of existence if you are an 8 or higher and you're a woman. If you're a man to some extent, but especially if you're an 8 or higher and you're a woman, you're on another stratosphere of existence from the ages of like 15 to 35, basically.
And maybe beyond,
and maybe beyond. Some women are looking great in their 40s, and good for them. But Jennifer Lopez, call me. No, I'm kidding. It's looking good in her 50s. Yeah. But it's I wonder what my girlfriend would think of that. She's in the next room. No, just kidding. It's neither of us can say one way or another. I think that there's some naivete here, though, because it does seem like some women get shocked by this stuff. I believe that maybe this girl was genuinely a little shocked by this.
I agree.
I think she was. And it is a little shocking. It's shocking to see, again, an image of you doing unspeakable things. I don't know exactly what's going on in these videos, but I know what porn looks like. It's not pretty. I doubt that it was tasteful erotica that was being created. I bet you it was not that. It was probably porn, which is kind of an ugly thing to see yourself superimposed over. And it's an ugly thing in general, by the way. At some point, we'll talk about it on the show, but I encourage men to watch as little porn as they can possibly watch. I don't think it's great for you in general. I think it's kind of a bad thing. Megan Murphy and I talked about this a little bit when I had her on the show, but I gotta say something to these ladies. This is important. This is important for women to understand. Ladies, if you're like a 5 or a 6 or higher, and you put images of yourself on the internet where you're in short shorts, in a bikini, in a tight dress, anything that is even a little bit sexy, someone you know has masturbated to it. Somebody that you know has done it. Maybe not every guy you know, but someone probably has. If you are an 8 or higher, that part about having to wear something sexy for this to be a thing, forget about it. If you're an 8 or higher and you've put images of yourself on the internet, someone you know has masturbated to it. And I say this not because it's something I do all the time. I don't. I'm in a committed relationship and have been for several years, but because I'm a man. I was in high school once and college once and surrounded by good-looking chicks who like to post this sort of thing to their social media. Male sexuality isn't pretty. People generally seem to know this subconsciously. And unfortunately, the thing that I've just mentioned, which is that men do jack off to your Instagram, they do the same thing to your TikTok and your Snapchat and maybe your Facebook. Any place where you're putting those bikini photos, you might know somebody who's yerking it to it. This is not even in the top 100 ugliest manifestations of male sexuality. It does not crack the top 1,000 ugliest manifestations of male sexuality. So I just need people to understand, because it seems like there's some naivete here that is making some of these women be a little bit more shocked than they should be. This is a very inevitable aspect of an attractive woman developing a public profile on the internet. It's ugly. It is ugly, and it's gross. And to find out that your friend, someone you personally know, this Atrioc fellow, was engaged in this is legitimately upsetting, and I totally understand that. But you shouldn't be too shocked by it. If you're an attractive woman, some of your male friends who you may think you have a very platonic relationship with are not platonic. They are a different kind of friend.
At least not 100%.
At least not 100%.
Yeah. So there's two terms that are being thrown around here that I think are at least deserve a little bit of discussion. The first is consent. Consent is a very weird term in this context. Like you said, if you put your image out there, you've consented to it being seen, right? And if you've consented to it being seen, you've consented to it being captured in some form. And if you've consented to that, then it's going to be manipulated. Like, this girl didn't expressly tell the internet, here's my good looking face, do what you will with it. But isn't that the reality? I mean, we live in a world where Rule 34 exists. If it exists or can be imagined, there's porn of it. You've got that's that famous song from at the Broadway musical Avenue Q, the internet is for porn. Like, I think this is shitty. I think it's creepy, but I also think it's unsurprising. And I think consent's a really strange concept in this area. So that's the first. The second is objectifying women. Is it? I just don't know where the boundaries are and on where this is a bad thing. Like, if I find a woman attractive, if I just immediately objectified her, if she was in, I mean, I'm old, so like Maxim magazine, is that looking at it, is that the objectification, even though that woman was paid to be on those pages? Like that term's always been really vague to me, and where it becomes a bad thing, even if it is a bad thing, and I think it's just a rhetorical tactic. But putting that aside, so those are two concepts in this whole discussion that I think are very strange.
Yeah, it's why it didn't sit right with me that this woman in particular, I think the most defensible position for a person in this situation would be somebody who really isn't a public figure. I would be even more sympathetic if you are somebody who has not benefited greatly from being on the internet and being attractive on the internet. Because frankly, I don't know why people are watching her content. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just boring as shit. I could not stand to watch it for more than 2 minutes. I couldn't believe. I mean, these are long videos and streams of her just doing fuck all. And a lot of attractive women are able to do this on the internet. And so, again, it's like, if that's what you get to do as your job and you make pretty good money doing it, and then all of a sudden this is one of the negative side effects, I think we've kind of landed on, like, we're sympathetic. It's upsetting, but there's a certain lack of acknowledging any role that you might have played and just putting yourself in a position where this was going to happen, even if it's not right. There's no way to avoid. There's no way to avoid, unfortunately. If you're an attractive woman and you put your image on the internet, there's no way to avoid probably being sexualized in the process. It's just, if you don't want to be sexualized and you're a good looking lady, I would encourage you to not post a lot of pictures to the internet, because they're probably, especially if you're a public figure where there's thousands of men who are simping for you, then it's like one of those guys, doesn't have to be more than one, but one of them's going to fucking know how to use this deepfake shit, and he's going to use it.
And in this context, her job as a streamer, influencer, I don't know what term we want to use here, her job is to have more people see her. That's how she makes more money. Like, the more widespread her image is, the more money she makes. And it actually brings up something that I think will tie the threads of the two things we talked about here, Scott, is there's this failure to recognize reality in both of the stories we're doing here. In the Hogwarts story, it's failing to recognize that sometimes the person who creates something you love is not a person that you like or that has views that you agree with. Like, I am a Radiohead fan, and I'm saying that with extra syllables because I am a Radiohead fan. But I don't like Tom York's views. I just don't. And in this, we've got the same thing with this qtcinderella situation. Is reality is your job is to be out there, to be beautiful, and to be seen. And there's also dudes in the world, and dudes do something with that. The reality is we can't ignore that. You can be upset about it, but that's just reality. And I think that this kind of like wanting to ignore reality is a thread that ties both of these stories together.
I think it's a great point, and it also speaks to something I really don't want to leave out of this discussion, which is how detached from reality the response was in terms of how it affected this fucking schmuck, Atrioc. This guy. I mean, look, he should be embarrassed. He should be embarrassed. He did an embarrassing thing, and he should be embarrassed, and he should be embarrassed for the sake of his wife. I don't know if he has kids, but it would be embarrassing to explain to your children. It's embarrassing.
You should also be better at streaming. You alt tab while you have a porn
You're
tab up. Like, what's wrong with you?
Streamer, dude. That's another factor.
Not excusing the behavior, but
you're professional. But his video, for anyone that hasn't seen it, I think, Ben, you should remind me in post. I really want to put a screen cap of the video up because I don't know how to justify the bizarreness of the image of this video without putting a screen cap of it on the screen during the show today. His apology video is him sobbing just as hard as the woman who was allegedly victimized here, just sobbing. A grown man just sobbing, which no one wants to see. And again, if he had just come on and said, hey, guys, there was something that here's what he should have done. He could have come out and said, hey guys, there was something on my last stream that wasn't meant to be seen. And I'm embarrassed that you saw it. I'm sorry that I looked at it. And I'm going to call my friends and explain to them the situation and apologize to them. And I'm sorry you guys saw it, and I apologize. And I'll be speaking to my wife and my friends about it privately. And that's what he could have done. He could have acknowledged it, apologized for it, and moved on. Instead, there's this video of him sobbing and being like, I'm stupid. I'm so stupid. Like hitting himself. I'm an idiot, which like is something you do when you've really fucked up. Like, look, we've all been there. I've been there. I've sobbed. I've hit myself in the head. Been like, I'm stupid. We've all been that guy. But it's reserved for some of the lowest points of your life. This guy got caught jerking it. Like and the strangest part by far is that he asked his wife to sit in the background of the video. And this is why I want there to be a frame at this point in the video that you guys can look at, probably here-ish above me. Yeah. His wife is sitting there saying nothing, also sobbing, and that's it. She's just there sobbing with him. And I was like, why? What does that add to the situation? It just makes it sadder. Like, it just plays up the patheticness of this, seeing that he has this wife who's sobbing in the background. This should be a privately handled thing. Sure, apologize to your wife. It's embarrassing for her that you were jerking it to your friends. It's embarrassing. Apologize to your wife. But don't ask her to sit there and cry with you for pity points or whatever this guy was going for. That was just the most bizarre thing about this story, was that this guy really acted like he committed a crime. He acted like he did something unforgivable and his life is over. I'll say, I don't watch this guy stream. If I was a huge fan of his, I would still watch his content after this. I wouldn't even be like, oh, this is so bad, I can't support this guy. I'd be like, okay, he did a weird, embarrassing thing. Louis C.K., similar thing. I've seen Louis C.K. since his nonsense came out.
Yeah.
You know, it's you know,
Twitter makes the world seem very small, and so does communities like this. One thing, and you say like, why do you do this? I am almost tempted to speculate. I'm going to speculate that the reason for this overblown showing of remorse and bringing in the wife, which I still think is ridiculous, even under this theory I have, is he needs to show that he's being punished as a way of showing that he's atoning for these sins. This whole like putting out a message like, I'm going to deal with this privately, I'm really sorry, like let's move on. That's not going to be enough. This is his attempt to show like, look, I feel bad. I need you to know that I feel bad. Look, don't you feel bad for me right now because I look like a pathetic, look pathetic. I think that's probably the theory behind this. I'm not saying he wasn't genuinely sorry, but we went beyond authenticity to please forgive me. Look how bad I feel.
It speaks to victimhood culture because it's like, oh, I'm a victim too. I'm in pain because I did a bad thing and now I feel bad. And so you can see that I'm in pain. And so I'm also at least a slightly sympathetic figure here. And it reminds me of like, I was a kid once and I remember I was hanging out with some friends.
You were a kid once?
Brother. Yes. I was a kid once many eons ago. Once
twice.
When I was a kid, I was it's a slightly less dyslexic way of saying it. Once when I was a kid, I was hanging out with some friends of mine. I may have been like 7 or 8 years old. They were brother and sister and they were fighting while I was hanging out with them. And the brother like smacked the sister and she starts crying. And the second she started crying, he started crying. And I always think back to this moment. It's so funny to watch. Like the girl starts crying and then the guy just sees that, the little boy, and he just goes, and then he starts crying.
Right.
And it was like, because the mom is coming over and he's like, oh shit, I gotta cry. Like, and it's like kids know this on like a subconscious level. Like victimhood culture runs deep. You know that when you've done something bad, if you can show that you're in pain or a sympathetic figure in the process, you can probably get off a little bit easier. And I think it worked out pretty well for this kid. As I recall, the mom was like, what happened? Like, instead of just being like, what the fuck did you do?
Right.
But anyway,
you're sitting there laughing, pointing at the girl who's crying, that doesn't work well.
Yeah. Which, isn't what this guy should have done. I'm not saying he should have laughed it off. Like some people did. Some people did say like, this is nothing. I do think it's legitimately embarrassing. You should apologize to your friends. You should apologize to your wife. But it was totally, I think you're right, Ben, that it might've been a little self-serving to like, look how much pain I'm in. Oh my God. Yeah. But that's going to be it for today's show. We're a little bit over time. I appreciate you being here with me today, Ben. I think this was a good discussion. We'll talk more about these issues in the future. These are two things that I think aren't going away, unfortunately, the deepfakes and the trans stuff. I did see the stuff about Jamie Reed, the whistleblower in Missouri. We're not going to cover that on today's show. I'm going to wait until that develops a little bit more, but we will probably talk about that. And I'm glad that came out. Thanks everyone for being with us today. If you're on iTunes, 5 stars, and please do follow the podcast on all podcast platforms. Like, comment, and subscribe if you're on YouTube. Appreciate you. See you next time on the Veritas Podcast.